of Maize, an acrylic on paper by the artist Juan Gomez, completed in 1999. That's me over here, people. This work on paper is part of my Noir Series. This is a series of work that I started in the summer of 1999. At the time, I was part of an art group called Art Pratique, Art Alegre, with various artists from the tri-state area. Roldan West, then the group leader, suggested to me, Juan Gomez, paint your drawings. Taking his advice literally, thus the Noir series of acrylic on papers began. In 1998, I was young, 29 years old, an artist with no ability to frame my own artwork, which is done mostly on paper. To save money, I began to draw tiny 5 by 5 inch black and white drawings to fit standard frames at the time. Did those drawings at that size for over 15 years. In the summer of 1999, I was offered to be a part of a 2-person show exhibition with sculptor Mark Pilato at the Roger Lapel Galleries in Philadelphia. And that show would be held in December of 1999. Myself and Mark Pilato came up with an excellent show title called Defining the Edge, where Queen of Maize had his debut to the public for the first time. Queen of Maize has been in exhibitions for over 20 years. That 21-year-old piece reminds me of Max Beckmann's 1946 oil painting called Actresses. As you see here, those two paintings are very similar to each other. What makes this period of time interesting in 1999 and 2000, this was the time before 9/11, the beginning of the internet age. Queen of Maize is about two sisters sharing secrets hidden, about two sisters talking about their secrets, basically, in a fractal maze, like an interior looking out into nature. Max Beckmann's Actresses, 1946 oil painting. The lady on the left, as you see, her face is covered in some kind of white sheet. The other woman's face is exposed, wearing a gold crown. You look at it closely, the similarities between these two pieces. I've never seen this piece until I looked it up on the internet, and then I saw Queen of Maize, and I was really shocked to see how a piece that was done decades before this one, how similar the compositions were, but yet they were so different, but yet the same. Ironically, Queen of Maize, female on the left, face is exposed. The right face covered in some kind of ominous black void with a crown on top. You see, on that drawing, that painting rather, piece of artwork on paper, whatever, they naturally call that a drawing. You know, her face is totally covered. In Max Beckmann pieces, there's a sheet covering her face, yet revealing a little bit on the mirror, but it's basically covered. You can't see it. And in my piece is the same thing, but very, very different. Beckmann's Actresses is more vibrant, yet the theme in both paintings are eerily similar in postures. Gomez's Queen of Maize is darker and more mysterious, yet both works have crowns, 4 hands, 2 sets of breasts. Except for Gomez's work, women are without legs, boots, red books, a little miscellaneous stuff. The paintings are very similar. In my family, I had 2 sisters, 3 half-sisters, and 1 brother. Throughout the year, I've witnessed my sister having private conversations in person by phone, which fascinated me, The expressions and tone of voice on some type of topic or dilemma. It's amazing how this painting relates to that conversation that I've seen when my sister's having some type of personal comment. I don't know what they were saying, but in the painting Queen of Maize, you'll see that. Sort of fantasies of a bachelor like me. If I were married, the longing to find my better half, whoever she may be, are instilled in my imagery. I mean, in most of the imagery that I do, you see a duality. Most of them, you'll see the male, the female, but in this case, there was two females, which was pretty, pretty different for something that I would normally do. Beckmann's, Max Beckmann died of a heart attack back in 1950, while going to the Metropolitan Museum of Art to visit his self-portrait he painted. They recently acquired, something they recently acquired. Beckmann is one of the best German expressionist painter of his time. My Noir series has been often compared to his paintings, a major compliment when I'm compared to him by people who don't know me. And recently I did receive a compliment that way by a gentleman online who's familiar with my work, but I'm like, wow, you mentioned Max Beckmann. Queen of Maze, the methodology behind Queen of Maze consists of a 140-pound paper, watercolor paper. It is cold pressed. It's always rugged edges. And then I treat it with some white gesso. The Noir Series palette, I often use Payne's Gray, Burnt Umber, Raw Sienna, Yellow Ochre, Titanium White, Mars Black, with a mix of ultramarine blue, green oxide, and other assorted colors for delicate accents. You may not see those colors, but I tell you, they're there in those works. I mean, I just bunched them up. It's just a whole hodgepodge in a melange of colors. You'd have to really look at it, on a fine microscope. Remarkably, Queen of Maze is about modern American and global cultures. Why I say this? Really think about it. Two figures in a controlled yet broken inner labyrinth with exposed patterns of a broken home. I mean, literally, they're in a situation. The exterior and the two ladies are inside this crazy interior that doesn't match, just like their conversation. I often look at this and then I go along and I think about Pablo Picasso. I mean, Picasso had a crazy life, misogynist. He hated women, but yet he's been around women all of his life before he died. And this generally reminds me of him and Dora Maar. And Picasso's painting Weeping Women, which is of Dora Maar, oil on canvas, done in 1937, is a great example of attitudes and conflict with a touch of major trauma. I mean, the trauma, he traumatized her. He told her up front that he was with another woman. Another Picasso painting called The Conversation with, it's done the same period, 1937, both about torture of Dora Maar and Marie-Thérèse Walter. I mean, Marie-Thérèse Walter and Dora Maar were having Picasso at the same time at this point in period. And he did a painting of both women, Marie-Thérèse with her head back to the viewer. I mean, Dora Maar with her head back into the viewer. Let me get that right. And Marie-Thérèse looking at the audience. He was like saying the old and the new. In a way, Queen of Maze kind of plays a little compositional trait in this. Unlike Picasso's painting I've mentioned, Queen of Maze has the juicy element of betrayal of a three-way relationship. When art is controversial, many tend to flee from its presence, and maybe because they are reminded of their own turmoil, or dysfunctions. The questions are endless. I mean, with art, it's endless. I mean, with Picasso, Marie-Thérèse, and Dora Maar, it's quite crazy, because at that time, and I saw a film based on Pablo Picasso's biography where Dora Maar and Marie-Thérèse were fighting. He said he didn't care because he was painting the very famous painting that he did back in the time for the World's Fair. We all know that painting, Guernica. He just said, I don't have time for this. I have to work. So he let these two women fight out their love for this guy. I mean, this guy was incredible. Okay, I'm going to go back to Queen of Maze, and I'm going to give you a little insight on the history of that painting. That year, 1999, December, during the installation of the show Defining the Edge, Mark Pilato and I would go to a bar called 30 Franks in Philadelphia for a cup of beer, a couple of beers, whatever. And after all afternoon installing our show, I remember catching a cab with Mark, to go to Frank's at that point. During the trip, I said, Mark, watch this, because I was talking to the cab driver, and this is an old fella, kind of gentle but talkative. Somehow I got him to reveal funny aspects of himself. I don't remember the details, but man, it was hilarious. The conversation exchange that took place during our trip to Dirty Frank's bar in Pine Street was just amazing. Understood gluttony. I understood gluttony at that time. I must have spent over like $30 on food. I mean, I was hungry, but I just went overboard. And from installing the show and that day of installation, I probably ate like 3 large slices of pizza, 1 large cheesesteak hoagie, later, to the point my stomach just couldn't handle it, and I just upchucked everything. And that night, I remember it was funny. And I remember then now that I'm not going to repeat to overdo it that way again, because that's going to harm my young body at that time. I was only 29 years old. 1999 was one of my more successful years in art sales. I was invited to do a lecture of my art at the University of Art, in plenty of art shows in Philadelphia, New Jersey, in the tri-state areas. Those days were predated to the smartphones, internet, and it was young. It was the transition between analog and digital. That year I was still living with my parents in a large house in Camden, New Jersey. It was wonderful because my brother had moved out to start his life, leaving me his former room to create art. It became my studio, which was done in abundance. I mean, it was one of my more productive years because I had a space all to myself, and I had the space to actually do big work. Before, I didn't have that. That's part of the reason why those pieces were small, 5 by 5 inches. I didn't know how to frame. I don't know what the hell I was doing. I was just a young 29-year-old, as you see in these pictures. To conclude this epic experience, I would like to point out 3 of my contemporary artist friends, beginning with Mark Pilato, Pedro Fuller, and Sonya Sider. They have influenced my life in many profound ways to keep me creating art till now. Mark Pilato, I met during my undergraduate years in the Pennsylvania Academy of the Fine Arts, acronym PAFA. Mark has taught me to look at art from a humbling eye to a fierce precision of intricate nature of the creative mind. I mean, he literally opened up my mind. I remember vividly Mark sculpting a beautiful tiny ear. I mean, it was a tiny little ear he sculpted, and then dropping the clay carving into a vat, destroying it completely. I'm like, why would you do something like that? Wow. Later I would to understand that mortality of art lifespan is never long. You never know when it's going to be good, no matter how good the work is. Pedro Fuller, my father introduced me to him a long time ago in 1994 when they worked together at Campbell in Camden, New Jersey. Yeah. Sonya Sider, I met her through the group meetings, and she kind of like grew on me. And Pedro Fuller was part of the group. He introduced me to her, as a matter of fact, and an incredibly talented artist she is, with an uncanny sensibilities in her visual narrative language. Sonya has opened my eyes to the personal experience of the inner self, like the recording of one's direction and goals in her paintings. And she literally did that. She said, I wanted this, I'm going to do that, and I do that. And later on that I found out in the last 10 years, she had done exactly what she had drawn. I was just like, wow. Queen of Maze is the image, embodies all of these experiences, and more before its creation. Realities one can relate to. I tell you, this painting was done. I didn't understand it then, and I still don't understand it now. Has a very mysterious quality. You'll see. This is a one of a kind. I literally painted the drawing that I did of it from 5 by 5 inches, as I explained before, to a medium-sized drawing, which is done in acrylic, gesso. Painting on paper is literally called drawing by museum standards. They're not paintings on cloth like canvases or on board. They're paintings, but drawings are really considered on paper. But anyway, thank you for listening. You guys have a great day, and to whoever's listening to this is a landmark piece, and there's a lot of history to it. It's a 21-year-old drawing / work on paper painting that will create conversations. I guarantee you, that is a centerpiece. It will create conversations. Have a wonderful day. If you're listening to this to the very end, thank you for your time. Have a great day. Goodbye.